So it's just fast Integrity Commission fast where they're asking information about people's spouses and children. And why are parliamentarians complaining about being asked these questions? Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to break this down for you, tell you what's been going on. I'm Dionne Jackson Miller. Stay tuned. So this latest argument seemed to have started when a parliamentarian tweeted and asked why the Integrity Commission wanted information about their spouse's income and assets. Then now, the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee met and Justice Minister Delroy Chuck raised the issue there. This is what he said. He said, why is the Integrity Commission asking members, that's members of Parliament, to indicate the salaries of the spouse and sometimes their children? He said, I don't know if this is something that's appropriate. And he said he had advised the relevant members to let them know your spouse is not prepared to divulge their salary to him or her, and therefore he or she cannot report. He went on to say these are things when we get back to the legislation, we have to make very clear what limits can be put in terms of investigation. He said we know they ask for information from banks, register of companies, register of titles. He said we need to find out just how far the Integrity Commission goes in terms of investigating, and the focus, he said, no doubt, is on parliamentarians. So look, I have friends and I have relatives who work for government and they talk a lot about these statutory declarations because yes, it sounds like a whole heap, it sounds like a whole heap of stress, it sounds like a lot. Although people do tell me that the first time is the worst time because after that, when you've gone through everything and you have everything listed, you can just update after that. And I've also heard that the Integrity Commission itself is very helpful if you're having problems. But first of all, in relation to the question as to why the Integrity Commission is asking for information about people's spouses and people's children, it's because the law says they have to, right? The same law that the parliamentarians passed and are now complaining about. This is what the law says. It says a statutory declaration shall include such particulars as are known to the declarant of the income, assets, and liabilities of the spouse and children where applicable. So in other words, if you have to file a statutory declaration saying how much money you earn, what you have, you're also supposed to provide information on the assets and income of your spouse and your children. This doesn't apply though, there are exceptions. It doesn't apply if your spouse has been living apart from you for that period. It doesn't apply if your children reach the age of 18. In those circumstances, the only time you would need to list their assets is if they're holding assets in trust for you. And this goes for all public servants, in case I didn't say that already. It's not just parliamentarians. Nobody's picking on the parliamentarians. So given that, people were a little taken aback or maybe a whole heap taken aback when this whole conversation started. So having said that, there is a loophole in the law, and a pretty big one, I think. It says you're supposed to declare the income and assets of your spouse as are known to you. So sure, you can say you don't know. Them not tell you. They not tell you how much they earn. They not tell you how much money in their bank account. And because you don't know, you can't declare, and you can point to that part in the law that says that. But given the intent and spirit of the law, given what it was set up to do, is that really a stance we should be hearing from our lawmakers. All right, so so the Integrity Commission did have to respond, right? And they put out a statement with the slightly feisty headline saying it was a response to a misguided statement, that's what they called it, made on social media by government parliamentarian regarding statutory declaration requirements. And they said the parliamentarian was ignorant of the relevant provisions of the Integrity Commission Act. So they explained the provisions of the Act that I just said for you. Then they went on to say this. They said it's important to emphasize that these legal obligations are universally recognized anti-corruption and good governance standards that have been written into Jamaican law by Jamaican lawmakers themselves who passed the Integrity Commission Act in 2017. And they said, contrary to what some commentators, including some lawmakers, have publicly suggested, they are not requirements imposed by the Commission. Now, Mr. Chuck spoke with my colleague Emily Shields on Radio Jamaica's hotline. She said to him, look, I got the impression you are asking whether the Integrity Commission has the legal authority to be asking these questions. Now, according to Mr. Chuck, he said what he meant is that if a parliamentarian said that he or she doesn't know the income or assets of their spouse, then based on the law, that's the end of that, and the Integrity Commission must basically leave them alone after that. Emily asked him if he was aware that the way he phrased the question gave the impression that he was completely unaware that the law mandates the information on spouses and children. And he said, if that's the impression, that was wrong. So let me say this. This wasn't an impression that Emily formed or that anybody else formed. This was exactly what Mr. Chuck said. He's now saying that's not what he meant. No, his issue, he says, is that the law needs to be corrected. He says he doesn't have a problem with declaring joint property, meaning if the husband and wife own a house together, he has no problem declaring that. But he is insisting that the provision is inappropriate to ask about income and assets held by your spouse. And he says that cannot have been the intent of the act, except it clearly is the intention of the act. Now look, Mr. Chuck is relying on the loophole in the law that says you declare the assets of your spouse that are known to you, that you know about. And the reason Mr. Chuck's position is concerning is that even though this would accord with the letter of the law, it certainly doesn't accord with the intent or the spirit. Because Mr. Chuck is wrong on this one. The clear intent of the law is to try to stop public servants, including parliamentarians, not targeting them, including parliamentarians, from hiding assets in the names of their spouses and their children. So look at this website, for instance. It's the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and it explains that relatives like spouses and children can be used as what are called proxies to hide illicit wealth. Now, to use their example, a Serbian drug lord buying a French villa can use money from his drug trafficking, and he might register the villa in the name of a child, a spouse, or a trusted advisor, so the police don't look up and take notice and say, hold on, where you get money from for buy this? To put that in a local context, suppose you have a public servant who has been taking bribes. So they have this whole heap of money. They don't want to put the money in their bank account because the Integrity Commission will say where you get the money there from. So they put it instead in the account of their spouse or one of their minor children. So in that case, the spouse or the child would be the proxy. Now, again, let's be clear, right? From everything I've seen and heard, this whole statutory declaration thing sound like a headache. I am very happy I don't have to do it, but it's easy to understand why it's important. And maybe if you're going to take a government job that requires statutory declarations, that requires you to declare the assets of your spouse as well, maybe that needs to be a family decision as to whether you take that job. But I don't see how you apply for this job, because that's what it is when you're running for election. You're applying to represent the constituency. You win the election, so you get the job, and now you're trying to wiggle out of the law that is put in place specifically to help to prevent corruption. And to avoid the law now, you're going to say that you don't know how much your spouse earns, you don't know what they have, which may, or frankly, may not be true. I have to tell you, I've heard from quite a few public servants who are just very disgusted with this constant cussing by the parliamentarians over statutory declarations and what the law says they must do. Because, of course, as I said, all public servants who fall within certain categories have to do this. I should have said that earlier. It's certain categories of public servants and those who earn above a certain level, right? And what arguments like this do is just undermine even further the trust that the public has in politicians, and I wish they would see that. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Dionne. I'll see you next time.